Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It's time for Word Balloon's Big Bout podcast, where I get to indulge in my favorite leisure time activity, and that's talk about boxing. John Suttress here. I've got the guys from Ringside Seats, and I've admired their work for a long time. This is Mike Cronenberg, Bill Detloff, and Nigel Collins. Welcome, guys.
Thanks, John, for having us.
Good to be here.
Absolutely, man. Issue 13, am I correct, Mike? That's the current issue?
That's right. And I'll add that we are number one, the print edition of Ringside Seat 13, and the new annual book that we put out, which is a collection of the best of the previous year's stories, is number one and number two on Amazon's boxing list.
That's fantastic. Yeah, congratulations. That's wonderful. Mike and Bill have been on before. Nigel, longtime fan, man. I've read your writings for years, and really glad to finally talk to you face to face. And all I can say is, like I was telling you before we started recording, my years of writing were in the late '80s through the early 2000s, and my sweet spot was that TVKO pay-per-view era and stuff of the early 90s. That's when I was doing my most coverage.
I can't remember when I wasn't covering boxing.
Hey, I can't wait to talk about at the end as we scroll down through the magazine and everything. Your fantastic new book that is out, your memoir. That is at the back.
Oh, you want to talk about that?
Sure.
All right, we'll talk about that. Really, most people have different kinds of lives. My boxing life is only one of them. This is a memoir that has absolutely nothing to do with boxing. I'll hold it up for you briefly.
Let me zoom in on you there.
Yeah, it's called Travels with Mary Jane, Confessions of a 70-year-old Stoner. It's going to be a 75-year-old stoner April 7th.
Oh, congratulations. That's wonderful, man. Coming up. Very good.
I think I'll make it.
I think you will. Have you had your vaccines, Nigel?
I got my first shot today.
Congratulations. That's great, man.
Yeah, I know. It was. I had to complain, then they got it right away.
That's good. No, I understand, man. I just literally scheduled mine for next Thursday.
Good.
So I know the feeling.
Nice. Everybody is getting a vaccine but me. I can't get one.
That makes no sense, Mike.
I can't get one. In fact, my
Did
wife.
you register with the state?
I have. I'm
then
on.
you can complain. Well, I know it's a different state.
You can't register with the state where I am. You have to get on the list for the Duke Hospital and UNC, medical plan and stuff, and the closest there is for anything. And I don't want to turn this into a vaccine.
No.
I just trying to kill you.
It's like 2 hours away. So I am going to do the best I can. Hopefully, when I see my doctor next month for a checkup, he can get me in.
I understand. Absolutely. Well, all of you have great stuff in this month's, or I should say, this recent issue of Ringside Seat. Man, I'll tell you. I want to not only obviously touch on the features that are in there, but obviously a lot of boxing news has happened recently, and I'm hoping people are out there that have some questions. And in fact, let's see here. Oh, there you go. Greg wants to know again the name of your book, Nigel.
It's Travels with Mary Jane, Confessions of a 70-year-old Stoner. And that part's not on. 75 next month.
So now you're going to have to do an extra chapter for the paperback or whatever.
If you want a little story about it, this was actually published about 5 years ago. Self-published. I have a friend who lives in the Philippines who has a small publishing company, and he did that end of it, and I did the writing. It's sort of it's a memoir, and it's also a travel narrative because I talk about the places where I go. It ranges all the way from me being a smuggler in 1967.
Wow.
Up through almost today.
Wow.
But, I'm not a smuggler all through the book. That's just the first section. I would probably not be here if I kept it up.
Nigel, I got to tell you, in Illinois, where they made it legal a year or two ago, me and my friends were like, maybe by the time we were hitting your age, I'm 56. And I'm like, maybe when we're in our 70s, maybe they'll legalize it or whatever. I was stunned when they finally legalized it here.
There was a big hope when Jimmy Carter was president, because everybody was doing drugs at the White House except Jimmy and his wife. And basically, his public statement was a very good one. He said he doesn't think the punishment should be worse than the disease.
There you go. Yeah, man.
My first experience meeting Nigel, okay. So I wanted to pitch Ringside Seat to Nigel. He and I were friends, online. We had talked and got to know each other. And I'm good friends with Eddie Muller. And I invited Nigel to the Film Noir Foundation's festival, North City Festival in DC. And I said, I'm going to pitch the idea of Ringside Seat to both of them. First thing I do when I meet him, we're smoking hash in his hotel room.
Heavens to Betsy.
That's all right. That's awesome, man. All right. Outside of Livingston Bramble, who we all knew being a Rastafarian and stuff, was smoking weed and stuff. Who were the other boxers that were?
Felix Lewis.
Okay, makes sense. Sure, Jamaican, absolutely. That's cool.
I think there's a fair amount of them, because a fair amount of them have been busted, when they took their drug test for fights. In fact, I wrote about that about a year ago, that it shouldn't be on the list. It's not a performance-enhancing drug.
Right.
It's the opposite, right? And I talked to the commissioner in both Nevada and California, because basically they're the two, or they were before the COVID hit, biggest boxing states. And both of them agreed with me that it shouldn't be on there. So, and basketball, everybody smokes weed in basketball. Ice hockey is legal in Canada. What the hell are you going to do,
Yeah.
And in football, they tell you when the test is coming. And baseball, they're so worried about the steroid scandal that they don't worry about weed. So that's what I heard from all the actual officials.
Emmanuel Augustus is a guy who got busted for pot several times too. You guys remember Emmanuel Augustus?
Oh, loved him.
Sure, of course. And of course, post retirement, Chris Bird and Shannon Briggs, big pot guys.
Yeah,
big pot guys. Who
Eric wrote about
right,
Chris.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Used it to mitigate the after effects of long boxing careers.
Chris Bird, let's talk about him for a second. Great boxing skills, not a big punch. Was that the problem with him ever making it over the hump to be a champ?
Oh, sort of. In my mind, though, the reason that he was so successful was because he wasn't a natural heavyweight and had a real speed advantage and a reflex, much better reflexes than those big lumbering guys that he beat, right? The guy that gave Chris Bird the most trouble when he was coming up was a guy named Arthur Williams, who was a cruiserweight because he was closer to Chris Bird's actual weight. So it's a double-edged sword. He wasn't, in some respects, big enough for those big guys, but at the same time, that was his greatest asset because he was so much faster than they were, and he was also a very good boxer and he had great skills. But I think he wouldn't have gone as far, in my view, if he had been a light heavyweight or a middleweight like he was as an amateur, because those guys at those weights he wouldn't have had the same speed advantage over them.
No,
yeah, I understand.
You disagree, Nigel?
My grandson, there's a note on the door that says, "Doing a podcast, do not disturb." That's how he knocks on the door. Man, he's 16, not like that little kid that did the guy on BBC. Jeez.
Right.
Classic.
Oh, that's funny. I guess he was just referencing first last to Emmanuel Augustus. That's hilarious, man. Very funny.
Cool.
So no, that's great. That's great. Hey, Bill, right off the bat, in the first issue here, or in the current issue, excuse me, you got a great opening bell thing about upsets. So that's show that for a second. But yeah, it's been honestly, first 3 months of the year and everything, it's been a pretty good year so far, 2021. As far as fights go.
Upsets are so important to this sport, right? Where would we be without them? And it doesn't matter if they're huge upsets, something along the lines of Andy Ruiz stopping AJ, or Ali and Foreman, or Tyson and or Douglas and Tyson, even the smaller ones like we saw with Loma losing and other guys losing recently. I don't know where we'd be in the sport if not for periodic upsets. Every time we tune in, we almost are looking for an upset, right? And it feels like lately there's a lot of them happening, which is good. It's great for us. It's great for the fighters. Well, not the losing fighters, of course, but it's really good for the sport and for the fans when we get upsets like that. It's great.
I can't agree more, man. I mean, yeah, if anything, it doesn't go according to script, and
Sure.
Unfortunately, with all the promoters siloed off and really only fighting, having their champions fight amongst their own fighters and stuff. Yeah, it's really nice when all of a sudden an outsider does upset the apple cart, and we're looking at, oh, look at that. Now things are complicated. They're going to have to do a rematch. I'd rather see those kind of rematches instead of, as we've heard in the last week or so, that in principle they've agreed with the Tyson Fury Anthony Joshua fight, but of course it was immediately set up as a 2-fight deal, and you got to, it's like, ugh, really. I mean, it's almost like a draw is almost inevitable.
I don't really mind that because if it's a good fight, we get to see it again, maybe, right? Maybe. And if it's not a good fight, if it's a blowout, the guy who oftentimes is due the rematch isn't going to take it. Right? Not everybody is Deontay Wilder, where he felt like I can win the rematch easily. Sometimes he just gets his ass kicked so bad he's not interested in an immediate rematch. So it happens. So I don't really mind that. But rematches as an after effect of upsets are always good, right? Sometimes things get set right, quote unquote, and sometimes we get a repeat of the first one, which is fun too.
Understood, Nigel. I really enjoyed your tribute to Leon Spinks at the end of the issue. I got to know Leon in his last fighting years. He was based here in Chicago. He was working for Mike Ditka at Ditka's restaurant, but still fighting at cruiserweight. And unfortunately, I covered a lot of his final fights. I'm actually bringing up these great photos of your piece. But speaking of upsets, obviously, that's one of the great ones. Prior to Tyson Douglas, they all talked about when Spinks beat Ali in that first fight.
Yeah, I mean, it was a huge upset. I mean, and it was on free TV, and so a lot of people saw it, and they had trouble selling it to TV. But they finally got somebody, and they got something that they never expected. I think upsets restore your faith in matchmaking. Just a little bit, If it wasn't for those upsets, you wouldn't. I think it would really be bad.
Having the perspective that you do, really, I mean, covering the sport as long as you have, is this the worst? Because literally, sadly, almost 30 years ago, I remember talking to after Foreman fought Pierre Kotzer, I believe. Talking to John Saraceno, who's a buddy, and Bert Sugar, who I would talk to regularly about boxing. And I'm like, is this the worst, like in years? And, Bert it's the worst ever. This is the worst, era right now that we've ever been in right now. And I mean, I don't know how, because again, with the promoters kind of really almost just inherently, like, of course we're never going to match, Terrence Crawford against Errol Spence or whatever, I mean, those kind of things that, God, again, we're going to watch these guys grow old before maybe they'll finally fight. So is this the worst time ever, or were there worse periods that you've covered?
Everybody says their era is the worst, and it's probably sensational. I don't really look at it that way. I'm in it to watch the good fights. I have seen some this year. And as far as the heavyweights goes, we've got 3 decent ones. I think Tyson Fury is really good. I always knew he could box, but what I like is the way he did exactly what he said he was going to do. In the first fight, he said he was going to outbox him. He got the draw because he was knocked down. And the second fight, he said, well, I'm just, going to go knock him out this time. And everybody laughed. And he did it. Yeah. I think if he has his emotional problems are over, or whatever problems he had, And I think he was getting a little bit impatient to fight. It's fighting that's goodness knows what's going to happen when he retires. But I think in a good frame of mind with no problems, he's a really good fighter. He's smart. The Travelers have a history of boxing in the UK and Ireland. And, they're much better, most of them, than the bare knuckles fighting, because that's their tradition. Not too many of them have got to the very top, but he has, and he's just really smart. And he's for a big guy, he's agile. He can move. He can actually think. And I think the fact his crazy act maybe throw his opponents off a little bit and think that he's a dummy, but he's not.
Clearly a very smart boxer, and really, there definitely was a change, because when he beat Klitschko, it really was. It reminded me of Ozzy Ocasio, watching Ozzy Ocasio fight, and just infuriating. The other guy isn't doing anything, and these pity pat peekaboo bullshit that you'd watch and everything, and so I really was disliking Fury for a long time. But I do have to say that. The Wallin fight really showed me a lot. Obviously, both fights with Wilder really showed me a lot. And I agree with you, Nigel. I mean, obviously, no, he's the best. And if his head's on straight, I don't see anybody currently that has the potential of beating him. And in fact, I want to talk about this weekend's fight coming up as well. But Mike and Bill, we can talk about the heavyweight division regardless. But yeah, I mean, I just really, outside of those three, all the other contenders. I mean, I think that the division is healthy, but I also think that we're really at a point right now that there is this wide gap between the top three and everybody else.
You keep saying every time there's an ESPN fight or there's a DAZN fight, there's like, this is the young and upcoming heavyweight. I've lost track of how many times they've said that, but I think it's those three. Back to the Klitschko Fury fight. I was the same as you, John. I watched that fight and was just completely infuriated. I mean, I was glad. I mean, I thought Fury won, but it was like, this is the worst fucking fight I've ever seen. This is crazy. I hate it. But I have grown to really appreciate Tyson Fury as a fighter.
He knew he had to fight that kind of fight to win. He knew
to beat Klitschko, really?
Watching it live, it
was
infuriating, but looking back on it in hindsight, yeah.
Well, but Klitschko didn't do anything, and I mean, again, maybe it was. I know there were a lot of personal things going on with Klitschko at that time. His wife and everything was kind of dealing with personal issues. Certainly, everything that was happening in Ukraine, I'm sure, was upsetting, and especially given that Vladimir was kind of in the thick of things as he was. I mean, it was a really weird time. And also having, much like Ali fighting Spinks, kind of having been champion as long as he had and cleaning house. I mean, they really were out of opponents at that point.
Well, Klitschko not doing anything during the course of a fight was not unusual, right? That's why he wasn't especially beloved by Americans, even those who accepted that he was probably the best heavyweight in the world for a while. It was almost never fun watching him fight. The guy had to be implored really hard to step on the gas and take somebody out because he was so cautious. And I think the mere fact that Fury was going to him at points and even threatening to punch threw Klitschko completely off his game. He was just wanted to jab and hold and jab and right hand and hold, and Fury didn't let him. That made for an awful fight. And if we can back up for a moment, John, I'm wondering the Ozzy Ocasio reference. Is it possible that you were thinking of Henry Akinwande?
No, I mean Ozzy Ocasio.
Really?
Oh, he's infuriated me with all of his BS fighting. And I remember as a cruiserweight and heavyweight, I never enjoyed watching him fight. I remember him on I wish I could remember who the opponent was on a Showtime card. It was before he fought Holyfield, but maybe it was leading up to his Holyfield fight. And I just remember Freddie Pacheco even just totally abusing him in the post-fight interview and saying, "You were terrible. It was the worst representation of fighting I've ever seen," or whatever. And it was all in Spanish. And, you had no idea unless you were fluent in Spanish exactly what Freddie was saying. And at the end, Ocasio like, mucho gusto, and he walks away. And then Freddie translates. I told him he was a disgrace, and he ignored us all with this performance and blah, blah. And he, of course, disagreed.
I gotcha. Okay, I stand corrected.
But Akinwande, no, I remember Akinwande. Akinwande was just a giant that, I remember that was the one that Tyson kept knocking down and couldn't put away. And they finally stopped it. If I remember in his, was that, no, maybe that
No,
wasn't.
that was Ribalta.
That was Jose Revolta. Excuse me. All right. Oh my God.
That's
Well,
all right.
here, we got good comments, and then I want to get back to what we're talking about.
Cool. Let's go.
Let's see. Greg McKean says, when sportscasters, writers fail to forecast an upset, what kind of biases do they most frequently fall victim to? Groupthink, continuity bias, cultural bias, cover your ass analysis? I don't know about that, but what do you guys think?
I think all of the above, right? And most frequently it's because the favorite or the A side is being pushed heavily by the promoter and or the network. And so they just go with the line that, the guy's unbeatable, the guy's the best thing since Joe Louis. And they just go with that without really examining the quality of the underdog or the B side in most cases. And that it blows up in their face. Would you agree, Nigel?
Well, remember that article I wrote, a year or so ago about how that the story, they're pushing a story more than the fight.
Right.
And if the fight doesn't fit the story that they've been throwing at you for months, they don't know what to do.
They don't know what to do. Absolutely. You're right, Nigel.
Yeah. and what?
Well, the damn fight. That's,
right.
Not tell stories.
Isn't that
right.
simple? And, I'm so glad you said that, Nigel, because I remember when Triple G and Canelo were fighting.
Well, that was what
the story
was about.
That's right. You're right, Michael.
Max Kellerman was the one who kept pushing about the story.
Yeah, he said that the other guy won the
story. Now, he's winning the story. He's winning the fight. And it's like.
And so I was a little rough on them, I guess, but it was true.
I'm so with you. I mean, that's the embarrassing thing, guys. I don't think we're going to get much debate tonight because I kind of share a lot of your opinions when it comes to this stuff, including, Bill, was it your piece about commentators and color analysts and whose role? And
no, Jason Langendorf did that piece.
Excuse me. Okay, that's another great piece in the current issue.
It is. He did a very good job with it.
And again, Mike and I will occasionally. I mean, I don't know if I'm bugging you, Mike, when I do this, but every time we'll be watching a fight, and I'll text Mike and go, "God damn it! I wish these guys would just shut up and cover the fight." And they have nothing to say. Nothing to say.
Well, it's well known my hatred for Joe Tessitore. Tried to make it trending how much I
worked with Joe Tessitore. He's a dick.
There you go. Firsthand. Thank you, Nigel. And I was saying this to my wife today because I was like really happy Nigel was going to be on. And I said, when I first got to know Nigel, he was on ESPN and they had Friday Night Fights. And at first they brought Nigel on and they had him talking between rounds, talking between fights. And I thought, this is fantastic. And then they stopped. That ended. And it was like, you've got this great resource of knowledge and this great writer, and you're not using him. And instead we're getting more Joe Tessitore.
Well, you know what happened?
Teddy Atlas.
The person who was in charge, executive producer of Friday Night Fights, was my ally. He's the guy that hired me. And towards the very end of Friday Night Fights, he was working me into the broadcast more and more. And then ESPN decided to fold Friday Night Fights because they wanted some of Al Heyman's money. And that was basically the end of my TV career.
Well, that's
not that it was that great to start with, but Matt Sanduli's the guy's name. He's no longer in charge of boxing there. I think he's just playing out his contract. But he was a great guy. When I was just doing the social media during the fights, every now and then I really ripped them and tried to do it in a humorous way. And he would send me an email and say, "Hey, that was a good one, Nigel." So to work for a guy like him, who actually give you a little bit of a free rein, was lucky. And he's responsible for my time there. And they got rid of him too.
Nice. I mean, really, Barry, I agreed with the column in terms of Barry Tompkins being a great always has been great. And the few times I got to meet him over the years when I'd be covering big fights and stuff, he was always cool. And I loved him as a commentator. And I always, Nigel, the last time the guys were on, I was saying in the prime when the networks were still carrying enough boxing every month and everything, I always said Alex Wallow was the best color commentator. I thought Marv, for being a general sportscaster, Marv Albert was the best of that era play-by-play guy. But the best team was Tim Ryan and Gil Clancy.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
I agree completely. Getting back to Jason's piece for a moment, if I may, I think
Please.
the thing that I came away with from that piece was that the broadcasters themselves want to be objective and want to be able to talk about fighters who only fight on other networks, and they want to be able to include fighters who are aligned with other promoters. They want to do all that stuff, and they see the downsides of the current environment as well as we do, but feel like they're handcuffed by the networks who are signing their checks. And I kind of get that. And the other thing also is that I spend a lot of time ranting and bitching about broadcasters who scream a lot because it makes me crazy.
Already crazy.
But yeah, it's true. But I have to confess that recently I noticed while watching old fights on YouTube, of course, which we all do, Cosell screamed. Other guys from previous eras screamed more than I thought was the case or more than I think is the case when I listen to current guys scream. So that just may be a generational thing where it's okay when the guys did it when I was a kid, but it's not okay now. It's kind of like you
never screamed.
Who's that?
Don Dunphy never screamed.
Oh yeah, you're right. Don Dunphy never screamed, and Tim Ryan never screamed, and Clancy never screamed. But the guys who came after those guys did. The guys who came after Clancy and Tim
Most
Ryan.
of the time you're on the air, you've got the producer in your ear.
Yep.
And he'll say something like, "We're trying to sell this."
Right.
They'll just tell
get
you.
excited.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've even done a little bit of regional cable here and there where they had me as a color guy, and it would be like, "Hey, John, get a little more excited and stuff."
And everybody,
not really happening, but all right,
Yeah, and I realize also that as much as everybody, and myself included at the time, loved Jim Lampley and the HBO crew, man, Jim Lampley screamed a lot. He's hurt. He's hurt. He screamed a lot and got really hysterical.
They fired him too.
Yeah. When there really wasn't a need to get like that, so I guess it's the way it is.
With Hagler passing away, they were re-showing, a lot of the first the Hagler-Hearns fight, and the Al Bernstein call. They're both screaming.
Yeah, that's a fight where I can totally be down with screaming, right?
Well, yeah,
scream your asses off in that fight, and I'm cool with it.
Got to pick your spots.
Yeah, exactly right. If you scream all the time, then nobody believes that what you're screaming about is important. Unless, of course, and we talked about this recently, Nigel, unless, of course, you're watching a fight that's broadcast from Japan and the Japanese announcers are screaming, that's cool. I totally love that, right, Nigel? It's entertaining, and I crack up, and it's fun to me.
I think it's because we don't know what they're saying.
Yeah, we don't know.
Right. It's like watching soccer in Spanish. Absolutely.
Right. I used to do voiceovers from fights from Japan for this, 2-bit, I don't know what kind of network it was on, but you could actually see it on TV. And we weren't in Japan, of course. We were in a studio in Newark or something. And people would say to me, "Hey, how did you like it in Tokyo?" But because we left the crowd noise on and back of us, just like we were really there. And you could hear all the stuff that, because the crowd's yelling like that too. And you've got, the broadcasters are doing it. And actually, people were fooled by it because they heard these Japanese guys yelling.
I love, that's one thing I would say too about modern streaming is that we are getting international fights in live time. And there's nothing like, I had an overnight radio job for years. So sometimes my sleep is all over the place. And there's nothing like waking up on a Friday morning at 5 a.m. and watching a fight live from Japan or something like that. I think it's fantastic. And it excites me. And I don't know if I told this story before, guys, Mike and Bill, but for Nigel's sake, Norberto Longo, the guy from Univision who used to do Mundial del Box, and I met him at a fight that was here in Chicago that they were doing on Univision, and it was him and his color commentator. The younger guy was Jesse, and I went up to Mr. Longo and I said, "Mr. Longo, yes," and I said, "I just want to tell you how much I appreciate your show. I don't speak Spanish beyond my high school, years of Spanish, but at the time I was on Bert Sugar's Boxing Illustrated Budweiser reporter list and everything, so I'd help make the rankings and stuff. And I'm like, God, your show is just instrumental because you're not only showing great Hispanic fights, but you're showing fights from all over the world. And I'm talking to him for like 5 minutes and how much I appreciate it. And he listens, he's nodding, and he goes, "So you like boxing?" And I had no idea what I was saying. And it was great. And Jesse, his color coach, just like, "Hang on, man." He translates everything. And Norberto totally lights up, pumps my hand, shakes it. He's like, "Oh, mucho gusto. Very nice. Thank you. It's very nice." But no, I love that stuff, man. And no, I mean, come on, it's an international sport. We need to be able to see what's happening all over the place and appreciate. My God, especially, when there are peaks and valleys in the various divisions that we normally would watch and stuff. It's great to see the lower weight fights. And like we just saw with Chocolatito and Vargas.
Oh, it's a great fight.
It's a tremendous fight.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
About that fight in particular, when dinosaurs, and I guess that includes me these days now, say things like, today's fighters suck and he can't fight, show them a Chocolatito fight, right?
Absolutely.
Show them fights of any one of the guys who are on the cover of the latest Ringside Seat. These guys can box their asses off. So I'm right up there with the dinosaurs, talking about how craft isn't as important as it used to be, and these guys got to learn how to fight and stop barking and set up their punches and all this other stuff. But there are a lot of guys who can fight really well, and they're all on the cover story there, which was done by Ronnie McCluskey, our guy in Scotland. It's a good piece, and every one of those guys, I think, that are on this cover could compete in any era.
I completely agree with that. They would definitely compete in every era and make for great fights.
Sure.
I'm bringing up the list of guys. Let's see. So we got Canelo. We have Estrada.
Yep.
We got Terrence Crawford, of course, Tyson Fury, Lomachenko, Chocolatito's on there. Guillermo, how do you say it?
Rigondeaux.
Thank you very much. Great bantamweight.
Don't give away the whole list.
All right, I'll stop. No, you're right. I'm sorry.
Find out who they all are.
I'm sorry, man. You're right. You see, this is the danger of giving me a spoiler and letting me see the issue.
Right.
Absolutely. No, honestly, guys, and you know this, and it's one of the reasons why I'm thrilled that you guys come on here as much as you do. I love the magazine. Nigel, I loved when you were running Ring as well. And I really am glad that so many great vets of Ring Magazine went to form Ringside Seat. It's a tremendous publication.
Thank
you. Truly, man, all of you and all your reporters, man, you guys do a great job. And it really does fill the void because nothing infuriates me more. And again, maybe showing our ages and stuff, but really the level of broadcast commentary we're getting from these things. We should be having an embarrassment of riches. And I don't know, I guess I get used to HBO's objectivity for what at least, and again, Nigel, I want you to correct me if I'm thinking back with, rose-colored glasses looking back and everything, but it just seemed like there was much more objectivity in their coverage, despite their own matchmaking for fights and stuff like that, maybe up until the last couple of years. And now it really is just, just like every other sport, homers really calling the fights and working for the promoter and not getting really great objective reporting.
Yeah, I mean, HBO just got bad. I mean, their commentary changed an awful lot, and I think the milestone for that was when they fired Larry Merchant. He was the bullshit detector. He's the guy that would cut in with some comment that indicated he thought the other guys were full of shit. Now, George Foreman was fun too, but for a different reason. He just said crazy stuff. But, Larry Merchant, I mean, I know him personally. He used to work in Philadelphia, of course, on the Daily News. And we're sort of friends, but I'm objective about that. I think that he was really good. A lot of people thought he was drunk. And I was like with him ringside. There was no... After the fight, yeah, maybe, but not during the fight. I just think they just didn't understand what objectivity is.
That, and also he wasn't a radio broadcaster slick.
Newspaper guy.
He's a newspaper guy. Exactly. and would think it's like when I remember when Obama had first taken over as president, and Ed Henry is like, "Wow, you didn't answer an issue right away. It's taken you 3 days. Why?" And Obama said, "I like to think before I speak." And that's Larry Merchant, man. Larry's like,
Sure.
you saw the gears moving and like thinking, God, when he shut down Mayweather, and if I were 40 years older, I'd kick your ass. And it's like, yeah, man, it's Larry Merchant. It's like, dude, this guy's been around for, since the 60s that of course, being part of Cloverlay, right? Wasn't he one of the investors?
No, he was, I think he might have still been in Philadelphia, but Cloverlay were investors in Joe Frazier, and he was working for a newspaper. He wouldn't even think of that. But I thought Larry's little soliloquies at the end of the show were always, sometimes they were brilliant, other times they were funny. And I think somebody wrote once he had one about the lint in his pocket or something like that, that somebody was making fun of him. But I always look forward to that. And he didn't have a long time to sit down and think about that. And that's where the newspaper writer came out. But he could because he was a columnist and the sports editor. But yeah, he brought literary quality to broadcasting.
Absolutely right.
Yeah,
we don't have any of that. We don't have any of that anymore. I mean,
but thank God we do still have great writers.
Steve Farhood is the only guy who's like a writer broadcaster in boxing right now. Is there anyone else?
Mark Kriegel.
Yeah,
I do like Kriegel.
But he's not even doing the fights anymore. I think they're doing the segments now.
He's more like a correspondent. Yeah.
The
fights. Yeah.
No, you're right. What did you guys think of did you guys watch a couple Sundays ago when they rebroadcast Ali Frazier 1?
Oh, I couldn't watch it. No, I'm not watching that shit. Not with Tessitore and those idiots sitting there talking.
Well, he did the broadcast. They didn't use the original?
Oh, no, they used the original soundtrack.
The original, but they cut in between rounds, and there was a lot of extra talk where it's like, I'm not listening to that shit. You don't need that for that fight.
Yeah.
That's the fight. You don't need any of that crap. I mean, you got what you need just watching what was going on.
I completely agree, but it seems, and it's not just in sports, anytime there's any sort of retrospective, they need modern talking heads to, again, as an old man who remembers it from the first time, to explain the obvious. But it's just, here's why Abbott and Costello were funny. It's like, thanks. Okay. Pretty much, and guys, I don't remember if I did tell you guys or not, but when oh God, now I'm shame on me. What's his face? Who I hate on all the time. God damn it. He does the weekly Friday show on ESPN.
Kellerman?
Yeah, Max. Max was talking about the hyping that they were going to show this that weekend. And he's like, both guys had undisputed claims. And I'm like, no, there was a dispute. That's the whole point. It's like they both had claims, but they weren't undisputed claims. You hyperbolic idiot. I'm sorry. I never liked Max. I've got the same problem you guys have with Testatory in terms of just hyperbolic. Although I will say, I agreed with him a couple weeks ago because they were asking what happened with HBO and boxing. And he's like, they got out-budgeted by all these promoters that are backed by hundreds of millions of dollars, and they couldn't afford the good fights anymore. And that's kind of true, and that's kind of why it was this slow kind of dwindling death of, boxing was still part of HBO, but it was getting smaller and smaller. And
well, that was partially their fault for signing fighters exclusively and not buying fights. That's when they started getting in trouble, right? They started saying, okay, we've got Roy Jones, and he can only fight on HBO, and we have power of approval over who he fights, but only sort of, and we're not going to really enforce anything. So that's kind of when the quality of their broadcast kind of went down to shitter, I think, when they started doing that. But
all Roy Jones' fault.
Pretty much. Isn't everything? And
that's refreshing, guys. I have nothing. I mean, the times I got to talk to Roy face to face, he was always very nice. But yeah, his lack of fighting everybody really was infuriating back in the day. I won't deny that. And at least that was my perception. And especially, I was working at Sporting News Radio, one of the fledgling sports talk networks of the early 2000s. And when he fought John Ruiz, and I would talk to the other sportscasters who weren't hip to boxing, and they're like, "Wow, he beat the heavyweight champion." I'm like, "No, he beat a heavyweight champion, and really, he beat the 5th best heavyweight, even though he had a title at the time." I'm like, "I'm sorry, it's an accomplishment, but it's a small A accomplishment. It's a Mickey Walker fighting, Schmeling to a draw kind of accomplishment. It's not. This isn't like, holy shit, this smaller man just knocked out the heavyweight champion." So,
I hate to be a prick.
No.
It's like just so the real hardcore boxing people who are listening to this, Max Schmeling beat the hell out of Mickey Walker. I think you're thinking of Jack Sharkey.
It was Sharkey. I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
No, Bill.
No.
Please.
Yeah. I get the Schmeling and Sharkey thing. They're easily conflated there. It's cool.
No, and seriously, no. I'm sure I will. Much like my Henry Akinwande mistake.
How would you right about Oscar Casio, though?
So you got that on him.
Thank you.
That was like Bear. That was Bear's greatest victory, right? That. And, I mean, he beat the shit out of Carnera, but the Schmeling victory.
Yeah, he did. He fought the.
Oh yeah.
Schmeling victory is probably.
Have you guys seen that one reeler that Turner occasionally shows of Max Baer sparring?
I don't think I've seen
it.
Oh man, he's a panther. I mean, really, like seriously. I don't know. Like I'm sure it was set up. It probably was set up for the cameras. But seriously, he looked so vicious in this, and I'm assuming maybe it was made to promote
that. He probably did it when it was Prize Fighter and the Lady.
That's what I was going to say. Maybe that's when it was.
Well,
since we're talking about Max Baer, I'm going to jump in just with a complete non sequitur here and say, by complete coincidence, I watched video today of Max Baer beating Tony Galento, and I completely recommend it. It's on YouTube, and it's not the whole fight, but man, he beats the shit out of Galento, which is really fun because I was watching it thinking, how did Galento ever beat anybody? Including decent guys like Lou Nova, who he all but retired. He beat some decent guys, Galento did, but he was just awful. And a real asshole, too, by the way. He was a real asshole to Joe Louis.
Oh, yeah.
And he was a real scumbag, right? So I like watching the Lewis fight because Lewis beats the shit out of him, right? And but Max Baer does a good job on him, too. So when you're bored sometime, go to YouTube and put in Max Baer and Tony Galento. It's really fun. And I wish the volume or the audio was better because Max is talking shit to him the whole time, which is really fun. Max Baer is talking shit to Galento the whole time. It's great. So I got to watch that. Everybody listen, go to YouTube after this is over and put in Max Baer and Tony Galento. It's fun.
I did a piece for Boxing News about Max Baer not too long ago, and I found out some things were really interesting about him. His brother, Buddy Baer, was not interviewed by me, but I dug up the interview. And he said that with Max, payday was party day. Every other day was ladies' day. And that's pretty much it. One time I forget who he'd lost to, or his career was early in his career. Something went wrong. Somebody gave him, I think the promoter gave him $6,000. And he went to Vegas, and he was back in a couple of weeks, broke with this babe with him. What Buddy said really hit me was that he wasn't really a fighter. He didn't have the fighter's mentality. He did it for the money. And, he was a lovable type. Women adored him. But, the death of the fighter he killed, that tortured him till his death.
Ernie Chef.
Yeah. And there's another guy earlier in his career.
Campbell.
Yeah.
Right, Campbell, yeah.
Yeah, and it was how long after it was, when he died, after he killed those guys. And it tortured him. And he never got over it. A lot of fighters, it's going to bother anybody, I think. But a lot of guys managed to shake it off and keep going. And he kept going his fighting, but it just was on his mind the rest of his life. He would go in his room and cry. He didn't have a tough guy mentality. He just had a great right hand, and he was big, and he was tough. But
he was fast too. I mean,
he was a fighter that people really remembered. That really only had that championship for a very short
And
time.
what you were saying, Nigel, is just what makes it even worse, that movie, the portrayal of the Ron Howard movie, how he was.
Oh yeah, that was
Cinderella Man. Yeah.
disgusting that was. I can't even watch that movie. I was just told about how it was. What I was going to say about the Galento Bear fight was that, Bill, since you and I are Abbott Costello fans, there's a great interview post-fight of Bud Abbott interviewing Max Baer after the fight.
Really? Oh, I got to see that.
Wow.
Cool.
Oh my
That's
God,
cool.
I'd love to see that. Yeah, the way we were, that old 70s Kurt Gowdy show.
Yeah.
Replay great sports moments, and it used to be on ESPN Classic.
Yeah.
That used to be on YouTube with Lewis and Galento.
Oh, yeah?
reliving the fight, and it's
Oh, yeah, I've seen
hilarious
it. That's
to watch.
right.
That
Galento's
was
got a toupee on. Yeah, I've seen that one.
And regarding Bear, and Nigel, I want to ask you if you know the deal with this. Max Baer Jr., Jethro from the Beverly Hillbillies. When Cinderella Man came out, I interviewed Jr., knowing that the way they were portraying Max and Cinderella Man was completely wrong, and I felt really bad. And in fact, our morning guy at the network had Ron Howard on, and I'm like, you got to ask him what's the deal with the way they portray Max Baer, because every historian I knew said that Max was a sweetheart and that he was not proud, as you were saying, Nigel and Bill, about killing guys. I mean, yeah, they haunted him for the rest of his life. And Ron's explanation was, well, we needed a villain. And I'm like, the Depression was the villain. You didn't, the society, the way things were back then. That's enough of a thing to get over. But regarding Jethro, I don't know if you know or not, Nigel. Bert Sugar used to tell me all the time that Max Jr. was really Buddy's son, and not Max's son.
I heard that rumor too, because Tom Weaver, who's a writer that my brother and I know, has interviewed a lot of like old time Hollywood guys and character actors, and he interviewed Buddy Bear, because Buddy Bear went on and had a movie career, and he didn't admit it, but there was that rumor kind of like lingering around that Max Baer Jr. was Buddy's son.
So I don't know. No thoughts on I don't know.
I know when after his acting career was over, Junior, he made a very good living out of making pinball machines and slot for Vegas. Gambling machines, and the ones with the big flashy signs, and pinball machines, everything. So he didn't he probably made more money doing that than he did being an actor.
Well, and when I was talking to him, he was still trying to get a Beverly Hillbillies themed casino going in Nevada and everything. We talked for over an hour. He was incredible. I loved talking to him. He had great stories about Max and Buddy. It was a pleasure talking to him, but this was early 2000s, and I remember talking to Bert about it. And he's like, I think he's Buddy's son. And I'm like, okay. I didn't know that. So I miss Bert, man, and I know you guys have had your time with Bert as well. He was terrific to me and really helped me get going at a time when my broadcasting career was kind of in between rounds, and I started writing, covering boxing for Ring and Boxing Illustrated when Steve was editing Ring. I don't think you were editing then, Nigel. This was 89?
Steve started in 90, I think. He started in 90, yeah.
Oh, yeah, so maybe it was 90. That makes sense. But, yeah, I mean, I just, I would send, like, very detailed kind of reports, and they'd get cut down and everything in Ring, and it was cool. But, Bert would write it. Bert would print everything I wrote. So that was great. So I leaned more towards Bert. And, it really helped me out from a broadcasting standpoint, and it was fun writing for those years from like 89 till about 96 is about when I stopped writing and concentrating more on the broadcast side and covering the sport and radio and occasional television.
For all his faults, Bert was very kind guy. He helped me. He helped you. He would talk to anybody, all the fans. He'd sign autographs. He loved that stuff.
Yeah.
And he was really good at it, and he enjoyed it. Just don't give him the checkbook. That's all.
You're not wrong.
Everything else, he was one of those guys you're never going to forget. And like you, he helped me. I'm sure he helped a lot of people.
Keith Olbermann. I remember when he passed away, Keith did an incredible obituary on his MSNBC show when he was talking mostly politics and stuff, and he carved the last 5 minutes out to give a nice tribute to Burt, and it was like, oh, it was terrific. So, and a lot of Chicago people, all he did was help me here in Chicago, because he was like kind of my seal of approval that I was writing for Boxing Illustrated and stuff, and it only helped me locally in terms of covering representing and covering the sport. And I always say, man, I was a foot soldier. I was a beat reporter. As far as they'd have me up in the rafters as far as the auxiliary press section. Very rarely made it to ringside for the big fights that I did cover, but I was there, and I got to be there for the whole week of experience, being in the press room and talking to everybody, and getting the right interviews, and dragging Frank Bruno to the phone when he fought Tyson the second time, and getting him on with the Chicago guys, and same with Roy and James Toney and guys like that. Yeah, it was a good time. Chavez and although Chavez I couldn't get to the phone, but a lot of those '90s King fights. I remember when Chavez and Frankie Randall fought, and Randall upset him. I was there for that one.
That was great.
That's a great upset. Absolutely, man.
That right hand, man, put him down.
Another great feature for this month, and it's boxing's Bad Boys, the fighters that we all love to hate. There they are. Absolutely written by Nigel.
All of them, but there's that's a lot of them.
That's some of them, right?
Look at those, even just the photos, man. It's just that simple right there. My God.
I have to commend Michael here on that font choice in that headline. Michael, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect, right? It's evil.
Yeah,
that's something that just a top-notch designer would do. I would never think of that, but it's just perfect for the feature. So good for you, Michael.
Thanks, Bill.
God. And really, even your little comments about Tony Ayala made me rewatch that fight with him and Yuri Boykampus. In fact, leading up to tonight, it was.
I guess they still got that around. That was a great fight.
That was a great fight.
He just ran out of gas, and that was it. And they didn't want to get him killed, so they kept him on his stool. But he was well. I guess you read the sidebar, so you know what his problem was.
Yeah, no, and I remember again, certainly when he was coming back and stuff. That was the last few years. Like I said, I covered the sport from '89 to 2006 pretty regularly, and then I took time off and just I wasn't working in sports anymore at that point. So
I shouldn't say this, but you were talking about Buddy Bear Baby being the father. There was a rumor. I do not think it is true, but it was funny that Kathy Duva, one of her children, was fathered by Tony Ayala.
Wow.
Really?
Crazy.
Holy shit.
I'm not saying it's true. I don't know. That was just a hot boxing rumor that everybody was talking about for a brief.
Pretty amazing.
Kathy, when she was young, was really a good-looking woman. And Dan, her husband, no.
Yeah, not so much. No. Great boxing, man. Great boxing.
He was the brains. He was the brains. Everything started to gradually fall apart when he died.
So really, like her recent success with like a Kovalev and people like that she's had. I mean,
yeah. She, that I don't know. She got anybody left, Bill?
Probably not. I don't believe so.
Maybe one other person, and Kovalev is hanging on by a thread.
Sure.
I want to mention something about Tony Ayala, and there was a lot of talk on Twitter recently. Speaking of commentators, again, on the last DAZN show, there was a very muscular fighter who did very well and happened to hit very hard, and the commentators were going crazy about it. How he's a hard hitter because he's got muscles. And speaking about Tony Ayala, when he was young and an absolute beast, he had an exceptionally unimpressive physique, right, Nigel? Little chubby, he looked like a little chubby Mexican kid.
All over, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Covered in baby fat. Wouldn't look at his opponent in the eye, oftentimes when they were in the center of the ring, and then just come out and tear them up. Tony Ayala, as a young fighter, was just a monster. And you would never think of it looking at the guy. Even when he was in shape and ready to fight, he was a chubby little Mexican kid, but he was a monster in the ring. So this again, superficial thinking that we see a lot in broadcasting from guys who aren't really hardcore boxing guys, but are on the periphery of boxing, make assumptions about, the bigger guy or the more muscular guy being a hard hitter because he's got muscles. I think as kind of stewards of the history of the sport, and I hate how pompous that sounds and self-important that sounds, but if we know about the history of the sport, we have an obligation to point out when we hear something that's being broadcast to a large audience that's just bullshit, right? We kind of have an obligation to do that, I think.
I agree. I completely agree, guys. And then again, that's, I feel like the old man on the porch yelling and stuff when I do that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I hear you.
I do feel, I don't want to be, if disrespectful is the wrong word, because good for those fans that got this platform to have a fun fan show. And I think there's room for fun fan shows. But in place of critical thinking, it's just disappointing. And I just think, I just like every other subject that is covered by online media, you got real experts, and then you got your fan shows and everything, and that's fine. I mean, again, I come from a nerd background of superhero movies and science fiction and everything else, and I like hearing fans talking about nonsense, and I also like hearing real thoughts about, are these good movies, are these good TV shows? And it's just on boxing, it is just a bunch of rah-rah shows with very little real critical thinking. It's disappointing.
Being good on TV is what it's mostly about, right?
Well, and even I don't even know how good they are at being on TV, frankly.
Right.
I mean,
right,
again,
I understand.
But they're speaking to a different audience, and that's okay too.
Yep.
I don't know. Nigel, did you watch Tyson and Roy Jones?
Tyson and Roy Jones? No, I didn't.
That's fair.
I forgot about it, but you can't forget about Snoop Dogg. I'd like to have him doing the color commentary.
It's fun. It's fun.
Snoop Dogg
see those nature videos that he comments on?
Hilarious.
No.
Oh, they're
very
great. Yeah, like
very funny.
Doesn't surprise me. No, he's always.
Who was one animal was being chased by like a million snakes. I forget what it was. And the guy, he's real good. I mean, he's a really lovable character.
Absolutely, man.
That's
so
With
one
Martha Stewart making cookies and stuff, it's crazy.
Heard from the fight, the main thing I've heard is people want Snoop Dogg to do commentary on more fights.
Yeah.
Well,
I didn't see it. I had
he was fun
for it, but
if you can't have Larry Merchant, we want Snoop Dogg.
There you go.
Yeah,
well, I'd say if you can't have George Foreman, because he was definitely he was excited. No, he was an excited fan, and I know he's a legitimate fan, so that's cool. And even the shows on DAZN and these other shows that like Ak and Barack and everything, these guys are fans. It's very obvious they're fans. It's just, again, I'd like there to be I don't know, like I loved when Lampley was doing his monthly boxing show on HBO, and it should have been better. I really liked on ESPN when Dan Rafael was doing his show on ESPN Plus. It was on the streamer and stuff. And again, you had a guy who, he had a kind of a Jack Webb, Joe Friday kind of dead face kind of, delivery. Yeah, well, he did. And again, I love Dan. Dan's awesome, and Dan knows his stuff. Okay. Real smart guy. But it was just pretty much matter of fact and smart. And that's the thing. I don't know. Maybe that's an oxymoron, or at least that's the appearance of oxymoron for boxing, to actually have smart commentators really do know their stuff. I don't know.
The people who are enjoying Snoop Dogg, and I count myself among them, aren't looking to him for analysis, right? Where he makes us laugh, right?
Yeah.
And as Mike Jones says here, Snoop made that fight watchable. Yeah, Snoop is funny. We're not looking 100%. For him to break down the combination or add a literary sense or quality to it. He's just a funny dude.
Every now and then I would corner Foreman during fight week in the press room and ask him about serious fights. And I remember it was Barrera and Morales, one of their fights. And he just gave this very impassioned analysis of why he thought Eric Morales was going to do it. No cheeseburger talk, nothing, just good, straight analysis. And I turned off the recorder and I'm like, George, I like this George Foreman. I'm like, how come he's not on the TV shows? I'm like, that was great. And he goes, they want me to be the clown. He goes, they got Larry to be the expert. They got Jim to do the play-by-play. I'm there to have fun. He goes, that's what they paid me for. And I'm like, all right, man.
Go ahead.
Kind of interesting. But here, let's see. Mike also says TV sports personalities have become wrestling heels to keep eyes on the screen. It's very sad. Yeah, you're right.
Agreed.
No question.
Agreed.
Absolutely. So, and that's why more so even than Testator, it's Morrow that kind of
He's a
drives me
wrestling
nuts.
guy. Isn't he a wrestling guy?
Yeah, he was a wrestling guy, and I
He
mean,
was? Yeah.
he comes with, you can tell he comes with a grocery list of like, exclamations that, Fists of Fury right now. And it's like, yeah, okay, come on.
A plethora of. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of alliterative kind of analysis. Absolutely. Yeah. It's like, oh man. And like we said earlier, Dunphy didn't need that. He just told the fight, man. The guy I wish that I heard more radio stuff from was it Sam Taub? Was the old radio voice? But I mean, he was kind of the left and a right, and he had that great kind of guttural voice. The few broadcasts that I've heard over the years, I love shit like that, man. I constantly am like combing the internet for weird little radio oddities and things. I know Caton's company, Bill Caton, had much like with all the TV fights and stuff. I know he like kind of whatever, I don't know if he seized copyrights or whatever, created copyrights for the various radio things that he managed to grab over the years, old broadcasts of fights and things.
He sold his collection of films and tapes to ESPN for a lot of money. Not long before he died, actually.
And they never showed them.
And they never
showed the same ones over and over again, right?
Well,
right.
I love seeing those kinescopes of those IBC fights of the 50s. I love that stuff. I think that stuff is amazing. So
it's so different if you see a broadcast from the 50s or the 60s and then you show it today. It's so radically different.
Absolutely. I keep telling Mike, I keep threatening I keep trying to make the time to do an IBC kind of look back at the 50s into the early 60s and everything, when they really controlled boxing. And it's just such a fascinating time. And especially being here in Chicago, knowing that Jim Norris and Arthur Wirtz were such a big, part of all that and stuff. And Nigel, I imagine I should get you and on a one-on-one and talk about what you know about that period.
Oh, you mean about the gangsters?
Yeah. When the International Boxing Club was running boxing and really a front for all the gangsters that had all the fight contracts and stuff.
You know that Irish guy Kinahan?
Go on.
I think he has 200 fighters under. He's in the newspapers in Ireland, they say he's like, he's sort of like a drug cartel. He's using boxing and paying these guys extravagant money because he's laundering it. He's never been arrested. I mean, it was a rival thing. I don't know whose side he was on, that they had a shooting in Belfast at a weigh-in a couple of years ago.
Wow.
People were running out screaming and shit. So, those guys back in the 50s and 60s and even before that, they were bad guys. But the bad guys today just have a better front, basically. They're doing the same thing. They're trying to make money. They don't care about anything except that. They might like it a little bit, but that's not the main motive. So I think there'll always be bad guys in boxing. Look at all the alphabet guys. They're just extortionists. So, Barney Nagler wrote that book, a great book about all that. And
I have it.
And, so Decline and Fall of Boxing, I think it is.
Yeah. Octopus Inc., The Decline and Fall of Boxing.
Yeah, so, somebody should do a book, not me. I don't want to get shot or sued about what's going on today. I remember once I was at a fight in Philadelphia before the COVID, and Lou DiBella, Lou DiBella, he has rants. You don't talk to him; he rants for a while. And he came up to me and started ranting about this drug lord who was running boxing and how nothing. And I didn't really know who he was talking about. Okay, Lou, but now I know. So I don't think that's going to change. I mean, listen, you look everywhere. Everywhere there's money, there's gangsters. Whether they're bankers, politicians, boxing promoters, president could be really, really rich, and they should really, really prick and do bad shit. That's all there's.
Really good. Don Stradley wrote a great story that Bill was able to, I just want to say also that
Is this the one in the current issue? I'm about to show the.
Also, that Ringside Seat would not be what it is without Bill Detloff. He's the one who puts
Who's he?
together, and he finds everybody in all of these articles, and he's the one who puts together, these writers, and it's that's why this magazine is so great. It's Bill and the writers and all the people who are doing the great writing. This story in particular is just fantastic. I love it.
Really great, amazing story. It again reminds me of when Boxing Illustrated was at its best in terms of the beyond what was currently happening, finding these great gems of stories. And yes, Stradley does an incredible job in this story. It's fantastic, and again, it's in the current issue of Ringside Seats.
And I should point out, thanks, Michael. But Don Stradley, all you got to do is say, "Yeah, that sounds good, Don." Here's the deadline, right, Nigel? Nigel knows this.
Yeah,
all you got to do is say, "Yeah, this is the deadline," and it arrives a couple days before, and it's perfect. That's done. That's Don Stradley.
I mean, what Ringside Seat has done is brought back a lot of the old ring guys.
Right.
I mean, you're talking to two of them, and Don was, he was the guy who could give any sign of assignment. I mean, Bill knows now, he's editing, that you got to pick the right writer for the right story. Bismarck's Kriegel, you got to talk about fathers and sons. That's about all he does. Right. But Don's a special writer. I think he was a theater major in college.
Oh, wow.
And I know he writes about art sometimes. So he's a. It's funny. I don't think you'll mind if I tell you this, but for several years now, he's been living in like a one-room apartment behind a jewelry store. And what happened is I guess the job was in Boston, and he commuted every day. And I guess when things got bad, they were trimmed down the staff, and he, like a lot of guys, lost their job. And then the house he'd lived in for a long time, it was sold. And I keep saying him, and then his father died, which is sad, but there was money involved in that. I often say, "Are you out of there yet?" No, he says, "I'm going to stay back here," So he's like the old story about the starving artist in the garret. Well, even now he's not starving. He's still in the garret. Maybe it's his good luck place now. I don't know, but
yeah, I picture Don sitting like near a bay, like with a pencil behind his ear, and just like contemplating his next feature, and then just banging it out. Yeah, exactly right. Don's an amazing writer.
Typewriter, absolutely.
He can write.
An amazing writer.
Another thing I tell you, until he lost that job, he told me he never had a computer. He went out and bought a secondhand computer to write on. I don't know what he was using. I remember him telling us that he did a lot of research at work, and I imagine a lot of writing too. But wherever he did, I was always happy to get it.
Yeah, I've told a story before on other podcasts, but Don Stradley used to write for some little website, and I don't remember the name. It's some boxing website that has long since gone, and he wrote a little piece for it. And he was writing about the Lennox Lewis-Hasim Rahman rematch. And he wrote a line that made me laugh. And it was something about, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, after the fight, Rahman had to go to a body shop guy to get the dents out of his head, dents taken out of his head. And it was funny, and I laughed, and his email address was at the bottom of the piece. So I sent him a note saying, "Hey, this is funny. Good for you. This made me laugh." And we started corresponding, and he talked about, he wanted to write for the Ring and so forth. And I'd been there for a while, and he wanted to send me something that he wrote on spec. And he sent me a report of the Larry Holmes Butterbean fight. And man, it was really ordinary. There wasn't even a hint of the Don Stradley that we read today in it. And it was just like any guy who could write a little bit wrote it. And I said, "Yeah, go ahead and send it in." And I don't remember what happened after that, but he exploded with all his writing genius and talent and became this great writer. And I'm flabbergasted that he became the guy he is today, the writer he is today, when he started with this Butterbean and Lowry Holmes piece that was ordinary. But he really became his magnificent writer. Absolutely great writer.
Very
You
cool.
must have met him at the Hall of Fame. Did you meet him?
He wrote for Noir City magazine for the Film Noir Foundation. Wrote a great piece for that. So he can write on film, and I know he's done other film work too on his website, on his blog.
Yeah, Nigel, we met a few times. We met at the Boxing Writers Association dinner.
That was a great night that night.
Yeah.
Oh, we were all drunk.
Yeah. And also at the Hall of Fame. Yeah, that's a good guy. Great writer.
Hey, Nigel, yeah, didn't you get inducted last year?
No, 2015.
Oh, wow, that long ago. Who just got inducted in the last year or two, Bill and Mike? I forget.
Well, to me, that was yesterday, but
I can't believe it was
2015, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Don Lenza, Nigel, wants to say that he got to meet you through Carmine Graziano at the Lenny LaPaglia Mike Collins fight.
Carmine Graziano, boy, he was a piece of work. I started out like we were like enemies, but that changed. That we became friends, and it was funny. There was a fight down the shore. And the day after the fight, we were all like at the place where you have breakfast, getting ready to leave and stuff. And he said that he had to go in the hospital for something. I forget what it was. And I never saw him again. He died.
Wow.
But he was, hey, Bill, he had Teddy Mann. He trained Teddy Mann, yeah. He was one of those larger-than-life characters, that's for sure.
There's so many in boxing.
Yeah.
Speaking of Marvin Hagler.
Yeah, I was going to say, man, and here, because, I definitely want to talk about that. And you guys had certainly you got a book coming up, right, about Hagler?
Do I? No.
We have on the website, we have Nigel's piece about Hagler.
Right. Oh, excuse me. Okay, yes,
that's all right.
Yes. So, let's talk about Marvin. My God, it was a shock a couple of weeks ago when we lost him, and only 60.
Yeah, I think, it was so sudden. Nobody knew he was sick, and they still haven't announced. It sounds like a heart attack, but they haven't announced it yet. What was interesting about that piece that I wrote was that a lot of people really liked it. And that's always a surprise for a writer when a lot of people like it. I think the reason they did is that I touched on the emotions that they felt instead of just like a run through of his career, which is what you probably read from most other writers. I didn't set out to do that, but thinking back, I think that's the reason it hit home with a lot of people very personally. And a lot of it was Hagler, of course. If there had been some other guy, they wouldn't have had those feelings. But I think my piece probably hit home in a different way, an emotional way.
It's Nigel. It was the way you started it out. That story about how you guys stopped, charged up the television with the car battery.
Car battery. Yeah.
I mean that's.
Yeah,
like,
I find that if there's an experience that I've had in life that relates to what I'm doing,
but you started it out with that.
Yeah.
And it's like that is going to be an attention grabber, and it's
that's what you got to do with the lead, right?
It's already very personal right there. So, and it's the best. I'm biased, but I think it's the best thing that's been written about Hagler. And there's been a lot of things written about. I'm talking about recently since his death. I think it's the best thing I've read.
Well, there was somebody that's a Facebook friend of mine. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name right now, who wrote very recently, in the last couple of days, that reading it made him tear up. And which plays into what I was speaking about before. My answer was that me too. I'm a very sentimental person. You might not think that from my hardcore experiences, but I am a very sentimental person, and it hit me hard too. Yeah, so I guess that came out. And as I was saying before, if there are any firsthand experiences that I've had that works with a story, I use it because it works. Bill told me. No, it wasn't Bill. It was Jason Langdorf, who writes for. He was my editor when I first started writing for ESPN, and I did a couple of stories, columns, and I asked him fairly early in our relationship, do you mind that I bring myself into these columns with stuff that relates to them? And he said, no, go with it. That's what you do. So he actually encouraged me to. You can't do that all the time, of course, but that's. I think I do better when I see things. Go to Vegas for a big fight. It was an experience I had over and over again. You're always thinking about what's your lead going to be before the fight, or that's the thing. And often when I first got into town for like 3 or 4 days, an idea would hit me. And then I said, I can get something better than that. 9 times out of 10, I came back to that. And, it just, I don't think any of us understand where the stuff comes from that we write. It's, you can't force to be, you can't force the good stuff. It's just got to come.
Talking about Hagler from the early 70s, when they had those United States boxing championships, and because it's funny, one of the comments I saw here in the chat was that Bob Arum had kept Hagler from getting a title shot, and it's weird because King ran those U.S. boxing championships, and I always felt King was the guy that jobbed Hagler in terms of keeping him out of recognition.
Well, I don't think King would want him in there because in many ways it was a fixed tournament. Not all the fights were fixed, but a lot of them were, maybe Bob just wanted to keep him out of it because he knew there was going to be a scandal or something. I don't know, or he knew that he wanted to make money with it instead of Don King. I think they both wanted to keep him out of it. Don King for a distant reason that he didn't want him to win, and Bob because he knew that he was a great fighter and he could make money if he stayed with him.
Okay, what were you going to say, Bill?
Thanks, John. I think for as long as I've been on social media, at least, I think Hagler's death has brought out the most reaction from the people I see on social media, more than any other fighter so far. Certainly more than just a month or so ago, Leon Spinks died, right? Yeah. More than Leon Spinks, and not because Hagler was a better or more successful fighter, I think, although that's got something to do with it. But whenever there's a big reaction to a hero dying, I think it's most felt by those who were in their formative years when that person was at his or her best, right? So people around my age and older had the biggest reaction, I think, to Hagler dying, and I'm 55. So the people who were growing up watching boxing in the 80s, and there's almost a sense of betrayal when I think something like this happens, when one of our heroes dies. And everybody who was a fan of boxing in the 80s really kind of saw Hagler as a hero, I think, even if they were Sugar Ray Leonard fans or Tommy Hearns fans, because he had that kind of presence, right? And I think part of that is, some of it is, especially with a guy like Hagler, is, Jesus Christ, if Marvin Hagler can die, what chance do I have? Right?
Sure.
I think without even realizing that, we think that sometimes. Or what if Prince can die? Holy shit, it's Prince. If he can die, I can die, right? What kind of chance do I have if Prince can die or Marvin Hagler can die? Well, so I think, especially with a guy like Marvin Hagler, that happens maybe on an unconscious level because he was such a stud, okay?
Well,
so we don't see...
They're so iconic. What you're saying is like they're so iconic, they're almost immortal.
Yeah.
You can never...
yeah, absolutely, right. We can't even picture them dying, right? But... And as much as I appreciate all the emotion that people have displaying over his death, it's not like it's unique. Every generation watches their heroes die, right? It's just the way it is. Every generation goes through this. I remember my parents being upset when Elvis died, and I didn't get it, right? I was a kid. So the people who became boxing fans in the 90s and the decade since aren't really going to get it until Shane Mosley dies or Roy Jones dies. Right, or Lennox Lewis dies. Then they'll get it because every generation goes through this, and the older we get, the more we're going to see our heroes die.
Agreed, but Marvin really represented when boxing was still global, And I don't know if Shane and Oscar, as great as they were and the followings they have, and certainly in the case of Shane, nice guy. But I don't know. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, again,
Yeah,
I don't
'cause
wish it on either guy sooner
Right.
than later. But you know.
But we see that time as, and I see people call the 1980s, and I've called it that, the last golden age, right? But people who weren't alive at that time aren't going to see it that way.
Fair enough. You're right.
Right?
I don't.
The people who came after and were raised on Lennox Lewis and those other guys from the 90s, they're going to see the 90s as the golden age because they don't know any better because they weren't there for the other golden ages. Right.
But
So
also,
this is the way life is.
no,
Yeah.
and I hear you, man. You know, and I know I've told this story before. The night of Hagler Hearns, I was a DJ playing easy listening music in Bloomington, Illinois, and we had a teletype machine. So I was following the fight round by round, and you know the bulletin bell would go off that okay, here's the recap of the last round, and it was so exciting to read the blow by blow and then see it days later. But I know it was a weeknight. I want to say it was a Thursday night, right, Nigel?
I don't remember. I was there, but I don't remember what day of the week it was.
Okay, but I know it wasn't a Friday or a Saturday as we became used to having fights. And certainly Ali Frazier was on a Monday night. I do know that. I mean, and that's the thing was like boxing was an event, and that, you know, they would kind of it was a big deal on a weeknight, and it didn't have to be on a Saturday night for it to be a big deal and gather an audience. And it was closed circuit. And I remember Magic Johnson during the playoffs, like slipped away from whatever town the Lakers were in at that moment to come to Vegas and watch the fight and stuff like that. It was fantastic. And again, like you said, Bill, that 80s decade, you're right. I mean, it was a friend of mine and I were talking today, and we're talking about Tommy Hearns, and he's like, you know, it's a shame he wasn't, you know, bigger. And I'm like, how could he be when he was bunched with Hagler, Duran, and Leonard? And if he were alone in any other era, he'd be a dominant multi, you know, belt champion that he was. But more people would even, you know, talk about him in greater terms than just hardcore fight fans.
Yeah, I agree. At that time, it's just the way things work in terms of your perception. At that time, in the 80s, nobody was talking about these guys as highly as we are now. And that's just, some of it is, you know, we think are the best fighters are always the guys we were raised on, right? In the 50s, they weren't talking about, you know, the great fighters then. In the 50s, they weren't calling it a golden age, but if you read now about the 50s, they say the 50s was a golden age. Well, they weren't golden then, right? And the same with the 70s, right?
Yeah, you're right about all that. Absolutely, man. No, 100%. Was how instrumental, Nigel, were Pat and Goody Petronelli in terms of shaping Marvin into the fighter that he was?
Well, I think, you know, I've always believed that the fighter makes the trainer most of the time, certainly at the top level. And but I think Marvin must have really been very, very fond of him, stayed with him throughout his career. You don't see that much anymore. And I think just being who they were was as important as what they told him. They were good guys.
Yeah, they seemed like it. Yeah.
And they were, you know, I've never heard a bad word about them. Maybe Bill has or Michael has, but they were good guys, and it's sort of the earth kind of guys running a gym and Brockton. And it's just they weren't flashy guys, except Goody wore that wig.
Yeah, terrible toupee, yes.
But I think that they were the kind of guys that a guy like Marvin would trust. They proved themselves, and he didn't need to go beyond those guys. And I watched an interview with him fairly recently after he died, and somebody asked him, you know, what was your style? And he said, well, basically he was a street fighting style, and you know, they just sort of rounded it off for him, you know. But he was, you know, ambidextrous, which is, you know, he could do it without tripping over his feet. But yeah, I think it was the kind of people they were. They never sold him out, you know, or, you know, you might say he threw him in with all those bad guys in Philly, but no, that's how he made his bones. He came from, you know, very poor beginning, and I don't think they were rich men. But yeah, I think it was. I don't know if anybody else thinks what Bill or Michael thinks, but I think that was more important who they were as people than what they were as trainers.
Understood. No,
I'll buy that. I don't recall them, and this is just my own ignorance, but I don't recall them working with any other top fighters. Do you, Nigel?
Well, my memory's not good. Of course, they did train Robbie Sims, his brother.
That's right.
Oh,
right.
well, sure.
Okay.
He was better than. I mean, you look at his record.
He was a good fighter. Yeah,
He was a
I
good
remember him.
Robbie Sims was a decent
Agreed,
fighter.
Yeah.
compared to Marvin, no.
Right,
But,
right.
He was no bum. He was, he beat
Solid guy.
Yeah, solid guy.
Solid guy. And speaking of Marvin, and since I recommended a video earlier tonight, one of my favorite. There's so many great Hagler fights to watch on YouTube, but one of my favorites is the Alan Minter fight because immediately Minter went right at Hagler, and you see he's trying to he's feeling it, right? He's in his hometown. He's got all those hooligans cheering him on, and Minter could punch. He wasn't a terrible fighter. Minter was a decent fighter, and he's going after Hagler. And there's an expression now that's very popular, and I'm going to say it. Maybe you want to beep it out later.
No, you can.
Okay. That's very popular right now, and it's fuck around and find out. Okay. And for a little while, Minter was going after Hagler, and then he fucked around and found out. And Hagler hit him with about 4 straight punches, and Minter goes against the ropes like this. Ugh.
Wow.
And he's just turning away and just getting hammered. It's right before the fight has stopped. And it was at that point where he'd stopped fighting hard. It was just like he had to recognize, okay, this is not going to turn out well for me. It's a really fun moment in that fight. And whenever I watch it, I think he fucked around and found out. Because he wasn't trying to survive. He was going right after Hagler to show, presumably to show me he was a better man, and he found out.
That's awesome.
So watch that one too. Yeah.
First Last says that Bob Arum was promoting Vito Antuofermo. He even recounted that the four congressmen, 3 from Massachusetts, 1 from Rhode Island, that he had been threatened with an investigation for corruption. That's interesting. I didn't realize that.
I didn't think that the draw verdict in the first Hagler Antuofermo fight, it wasn't the worst decision.
I'm gonna have to rewatch it. Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't good. It wasn't a good decision, but we see worse decisions than that every month, right?
Certainly in recent months, yes.
Yeah, Vito was a tough dude. Vito was a tough guy. He couldn't really punch, but he took everything Hagler had to give. And he landed his own shots. He stayed in there with him. But certainly Hagler should have won it, but it wasn't an all-time. It shouldn't appear on any all-time robbery lists, I don't think.
I was in the stands for Hagler and Mustafa Hamsho here in Chicago when they fought. And
the first one or the rematch?
Wasn't it the rematch? I think
The
it was.
rematch was at the Garden. I was there.
Oh no, then it was the first.
Okay.
Fight. It was the first fight. Excuse me.
He did much better in the first fight. Hamsho did. Yeah.
Yes, and it was an entertaining card. And then later, when Hagler had retired, he came back, and Rick Tellender from Sports Illustrated wrote a great feature about him in retirement. And he came to a local fight here in Chicago, and I got to talk to him for a little bit. And I heard the broken Italian accent that he kind of adopted in his later years after he went there to act in action movies with Anthony Quinn's son. That's just, it was so funny. But, that Ray Leonard fight, everyone still thinks about it and stuff. And, I mean, ultimately, obviously my little ballpark observation is you give up the first rounds of any fight, you're screwed. And that's what, he didn't do enough in those first 4 rounds. And that's why I think that's why Leonard won.
Well, those rounds, yeah. I mean, as long as the fight's scored by rounds, that is. I was kind of disappointed at the fight more than a decision. But that was like right after Hagler fought Hearns. Well, the Mugabe was in between.
Mugabe, yeah.
Yeah, I was expecting more fireworks. And, of course, I think Hagler was already been a lot taken out of him by Mugabe and Hearns, and he was fairly old into his career then. And one of the signs of a fighter who has gone past it and is not at his peak anymore that Hagler showed in that fight, and that was pushing his punches instead of really letting them go. And also, although he did have some success along the ropes, he'd work hard to get the guy on the ropes, but couldn't get his hands off. and I think that, you always have these stories about what if they met in their prime. Well, that was a welterweight, and Hagler was always a middleweight. But I think that wasn't the A-plus Hagler that we were used to seeing. That he really took a lot of shots in those two fights, and then you add on everything before.
Plus, 15 wasn't like around 15 months between the Mugabe fight and the Leonard fight. And I know in the post-fight interview with Mugabe, Hagler kind of seemed burnt out then, where he's like, "Where the hell are you finding these people? Jesus," And I mean, it really was kind of like he cleaned out the division. There really was nothing left, and it was ironic that right before he died, I love watching Johnny Carson reruns on streaming TV, and they had the episode with Hagler before the Leonard fight, and it's and again, this with hindsight, I have no idea, but it almost seems like because the payday maybe was presented to him and the fight was actually going to happen, maybe that's when he decided to do it rather than because I could have seen him retiring after Mugabe because there really was nobody else left,
and he underestimated Leonard, right? Like everybody did. Nobody was really giving Leonard a chance that I knew, right? He was a welterweight coming off a 3-year layoff going against the middleweight champion of the world who hadn't lost in 12 years. So, or however long it had been. So nobody really gave Leonard a chance, I think, including Hagler.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what about the Duran fight? What do we make of the decision loss to Duran, a much smaller man?
Who'd lost to Duran by decision?
Or no, he won. He beat Duran by decision, Hagler.
It was a close fight. Duran put up a good fight, but it was not that close. I think the scorecards really didn't give Hagler enough credit.
Okay.
But he got the decision, so the right guy won. Duran's going to make you look bad at times because he's such a great fighter. Well, he was out of his weight. What he should have been, actually, not. And Hagler won the fight. He was the only title defense other than that didn't go that went the distance. All the other 11 previous, or the total of 11 previous challengers out of his 12 defenses, they all were stopped. And Hagler went the distance with Duran, and Duran gave a good account of himself, but that doesn't mean he won.
Right, agreed. And I got to say, and I might be off about this, and I never heard Hagler say it, but watching that fight early in the rounds, I think Hagler was a little intimidated by Duran. I know that sounds odd. Yeah, I think so. He seemed more cautious than usual, and he looked like he gave Duran more respect than he gave a lot of guys.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Bill.
Really?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
And I think he really had to step on the gas in the last several rounds to get the decision. And at that point, he decided, I don't care if I respect him or not. He knew by that point Duran couldn't hurt him, right? So he really had nothing to lose by going after him. But I think early in the fight, when Duran was doing well, it was because Hagler gave him a little too much respect.
Well, they both had such a presence,
Sure.
Hagler was usually the guy with the presence.
Right.
And then he meets another guy who's an iconic fighter.
Two alphas, right.
Yeah, it was. I think that was it. He respected him. He knew he was a real fighter.
Yep.
What'd you guys think of that Duran movie that came out a couple of years ago, about 5 years ago now, I guess, with
I didn't see it either.
Okay,
Michael, did you see it?
Michael didn't see it. It was bad.
I kind of liked it. I liked the way De Niro played. Oh God, now I'm blanking. Shame on me. Your guy, Bill, from the Charles.
Ray Arcel.
Ray Arcel, absolutely, man. Yeah, that was. I thought it was interesting. I really did. I liked it, and it really was as much about Ray Arcel going back to the 50s as much as, and a lot of what you cover in your fantastic Ezra Charles battle.
Thank you.
So absolutely. Hey, Nigel, you reviewed a book in Ringside, and I'm going to bring up the photo, or the page with it on there. Is it and I just, forgive me, I scanned it. I do want to read it. Is there a boxing component to that book critique that you do in the
Seamus Dust.
This is Bill's fault.
What happened?
Because, tell him.
Yeah, I agreed to review that book for that author, and I was told that it had some boxing in it, but not very much. And I didn't read it myself. I assigned it to Nigel, and there was even less boxing than I was led to believe.
Okay.
4 pages.
4 pages of boxing.
Oh,
Nevertheless,
my expertise is in boxing, obviously, but That was the only thing. Well, Eddie Mueller, she's a friend of Eddie's. So I didn't savage it. I went into the can, but took a dive because of Eddie. But I mean, she's not a terrible writer or anything. But this thing about boxing that she had like chorus girls and stuff coming to the gym, and it didn't happen. Now that wives and girlfriends come, but and
that's an old movie thing. That's that's watching too many old vintage films about boxing.
Yeah, instead of boxing.
Well, regardless, Nigel, I picked the right guy to do the review because Nigel read the whole book and wrote a great review. So
honestly, it sounds cool, but like I said, I'm like, is there boxing in this? I don't know. But that's
to be honest,
you focused on the book. You focused on what's there.
To be honest, Michael's influence and Eddie's and the whole noir thing has me open to reviewing that kind of stuff. Even after having learned that there wasn't a lot of boxing in it, I'm a little open to reviewing noir stuff now. That's not centered around boxing.
Well, it's atmospheric, and it really does fit the classic years of boxing and everything. And that's likely why I still
boxing is the noir sports. It's the noir sports.
Heart of the ball set up. Absolutely, man. No, I'm with you, man. No question about it.
If we could, speaking about books, let's talk about our new book.
Please hold on, Bill. I'm going to make you so. There you are. Yes,
Nigel, you get your copy. I'm going to send the copies to all the writers, soon, and the subscribers.
Okay, whenever it gets you, that's cool.
Outstanding.
So this is a 175 page book with all of our best and most favorite stories from the last year or so of Ringside Seat articles. Nigel's in here 4 times. We got a bunch of John Stradley in here. Importantly, we have every bit of the 21 best fights of the 21st century so far special issue in this book. So if any of our readers want that issue in print version and didn't buy the print version of the magazine, the entire magazine, that entire section is contained in this book, in addition to lots of good features, again, by Nigel, by Don Stradley, by Jason Langendorf, who I don't want to leave everybody out, by Ed Groover, by Steve Cronenberg, by all our good writers in here, by Ronnie McCluskey, by Glenn Sharp and Ed Groover, Roberto Jose Andre Franco has got a story in here. Real good stuff in the annual, the Review 2020, as it's called. 175 pages of great photos, great design by Michael Cronenberg, and really for the readers. Mike Jones asks, "Is the book available for general sale on the website?" Michael,
it is available through Amazon. You can go to our website, and on our website are the links to buy it on Amazon.
Great. Okay, good deal.
You subscribe, I just want to say, and probably Bill was going to say this too, if you subscribe to the digital edition of Ringside Seat, you get that book for free.
Wow, that's terrific.
All new subscribers get that particular book for free. Everybody who resubscribes when their subscription runs out, who are currently digital subscribers, they will get that book. And all recent subscribers who have recently subscribed within the last month or so, they're going to get the book for free. And we have been doing this now, and this was actually Bill's idea. This is something we've been doing for the last 2 years, or so, about 2 years, where we give the annual book, our annual book, this is our third, free to the digital subscribers. Our print is still an experiment. You can't subscribe to it, but Bill was talking about the 21 best fights of the 21st century. This is our best-selling print edition. All of our print stuff so far has been selling really well, which says we're probably going to continue doing print for now. But I'd like Bill to talk about how he came about this idea to do this special issue, the 21 best fights?
Well, that was really a function of COVID and the lull that was created in all sports, including boxing, early in the process before there was a bubble in Las Vegas and people started recognizing that we could do some things remotely. There wasn't much happening, and we saw too that some competitors were doing special issues that were selling well, and it was important that we needed to fill the gap that was created by the pandemic, and create something that would be interesting for our readers that didn't involve current happenings. And,
guys, keep talking amongst yourselves. I'm going to check out. So, Bill, please continue. I just didn't want you guys to freak when you saw my camera and mic go dead.
Okay, that's fine.
Continue, please.
Okay, so we just wanted to do a special edition to fill in the gap for some of the readers who weren't getting their fix of boxing. And regular readers of our magazine know that we don't do a lot of contemporary stuff. We do a lot of nostalgia. We do some contemporary stuff. So theoretically, we could have just gone with an issue without any current boxing stuff in it. But we thought it would be a good time to do a special edition. And so I arrived on a 21 Best Fights of the 21st Century So Far edition. And Nigel and Jason Langendorf and Jose and Ronnie McCluskey and Andrew Harrison and a little bit of Eric Raskin kicked in, and we came up with these fights that we thought qualified, and then wrote about them. And Michael put together his usual spectacular design, and that was the result.
Yeah. So how did you guys come to the idea of, like, did you guys poll each other? Did you like email each other? And I mean, how exactly did you guys decide on the 21 fights and the order of the fights?
I think that I came up with a list and asked everybody who was going to write in it, and I decided that beforehand, to look at the list and add any that they liked also. Okay, and Eric Raskin was a good one. He contributed a lot to the creation of the list also. And then I think I decided on the order, which was less important than the fights that were in it, right? The order wasn't as important as making sure all the fights were represented. But I think I arrived at the order by counting the number of times and the number of votes per, so to speak, that each fight got from each of the contributing writers. Okay, there were some fights, like the first 9 or 10 fights, appeared on everybody's list, and that resulted in those fights being the top 10 fights. Some fights were on one list, and those fights were the ones that got dropped off. Or if a fight appeared on 2 contributors' lists and they weren't going to make the cut and they got dropped off. So it was really the fights that ended up on the list were the ones that were contributed most frequently by the writers, and the order was determined by how many times each writer selected that fight, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah,
it does. Absolutely. Well, and really, so like, what is the assessment now, with those 21 fights and where we are right now in the century? I mean, how have we been doing in the 21st century as far as boxing?
There's lots of good fights that are happening every month. There are great fights that are going to be on some lists in the months and years to come. We just talked about one earlier, and the Estrada Chocolatito rematch was a wonderful fight, right? Even if a lot of people didn't agree with the decision, it was close enough that it could have gone either way.
I felt the same way. Yeah.
And regardless, it was a wonderful fight. And as seems often the case these days, there's always one judge who's got a whacked out scorecard, and as long as the right guy wins, we say, okay, the right guy won. But apparently, maybe even boxing is making some progress, because apparently there are reports that judge was suspended, the one who had the whacked out score at the end. So, yeah, probably.
Well, of course he will. It's just like Patricia Jarman and Jojo Guerra back in the day. Yeah. Absolutely, man. Yeah, no, I'm with you. Yeah.
But it was a close fight. Again, marked slightly by an unpopular decision, but a justifiable one. And there are those good fights that are happening all the time.
Has the fact that North America has receded as far as from an international standpoint, and like, where is the strength of the United States in the international boxing community? Is it there, or I mean, has it just been diminished because of where things stand right now. I mean, you've got, obviously Hearn and DAZN and all the other countries that do boxing and stuff. And certainly I know that the belt holders have been, stuck in south of the border and everything, and been in, Mexico and South America and the like and everything. But yeah, I mean, it's like, obviously with the venues, I would imagine in Vegas, we're still a player to a degree, but what do you guys think in terms of the United States' role in helping make boxing better or fairer or whatever?
Well, fighters still want to come here from overseas. A lot of that's got to do with money, but also I think there's a certain cachet to it. Look at a guy like Ricky Hatton, who was pulling in capacity crowds every time he fought, making a lot of money, but he wanted to come over here. Eventually, it caught up with him from some guy from the Philippines and Floyd Mayweather. So I think there's a certain cachet above and beyond a little bit than the actual money. I think the experiment of having fights in the bubble has been fairly successful. I miss the crowds. I miss going.
Yeah,
I can't get paid to cover them. So I think it's been pretty good. I mean, I think you mentioned earlier, John, that boxing was a really international sport. And I think that's really true. Soccer would probably be number one and boxing would be number two. There's a reason for that. It's really easy. All you need is a ring. You know what I mean?
Yep.
You don't need a team. You don't need a stadium necessarily. I see all these videos online of kids in Africa with no shoes on boxing. And of course, I spent some time in the Philippines. Manny Pacquiao's still God there. England. I think the one place that's dropped off is Germany. When the Klitschko brothers,
Really?
it was huge. I have a friend who lives there, and there's nothing much going on in Germany. They went from filling soccer stadiums to having pretty, small fights.
Wow.
So I think it really, the Thailand has always been big. Obviously Mexico. Argentina's very strong. The muscle guy that Bill was talking about earlier, he was from Argentina.
Yeah.
And, so I think that it's like that old joke about they've buried boxing so many times they've run out of shovels. I think that
Sure.
as long as we got some good fighters. Teofimo Lopez is a good fighter.
Oh, absolutely! My God, yes. And what a great win over Lomachenko! My God.
Yeah, I thought maybe like Hagler, he got started a little bit too late, but the other guy was real good too. So yeah, we got a lot of good fighters. We haven't talked about women boxing at all, but that has really taken off. Actually, right now, my favorite female boxer is fighting tonight in Puerto Rico, Amanda Serrano.
Say her name, Nigel. Excuse me. I was saying, oh wow, please say her name.
Amanda Serrano.
She's good.
Huh?
She's good.
She's one of the few that punch. I think she's got like 29 knockouts and 30-something fights. I look through the other. There's hardly any. Like look at the top ones, like a Katie Taylor, Kalisha Shields. They don't punch. This woman will take you out with one shot. She's a featherweight. She'd love to move up to lightweight to fight Katie Taylor, but and she's had trouble getting fights. She's who wants to fight her? She's really. I think that in the last fight she just landed it with one punch, Bill. It was just.
It's possible. I don't remember.
So anyway, I think that female boxing is actually helping boxing in general. More and more women that aren't fighters are learning how good a boxing workout is for their figure and everything. So I know a guy used to be a boxer in Philly that's doing that now, and it's the women that's keeping him in business. So
did Michael Olajide, didn't he become a boxing?
Yeah, I think he's
career?
a trainer. I don't know who he's training. I don't know if there's any trainers that just train exclusively women boxers, and that's the only thing they have. But I was one of the. I've always liked women boxing. There was a lot of people that hated it. And I actually started the first and only women's column with Ring magazine. It only lasted about 6 months before they canned my ass. But my feeling is this, like, a lot of people, I don't want to see the women all beat up. But I can understand that, and I can respect that. When the bell goes for me, they're two fighters.
Yeah.
And it's not like something I've tried to figure out. It's just instinctively. That's how I feel about it. And I'll tell you something about the women. They always try real hard. There's no bullshitting around. They may be not good boxers at all, but they're going to go for it. It's like, I'd rather fight a man than a woman, because a woman will try and kill you. And I think, it's fine. I don't, I think Bill doesn't like it, but I don't know about Michael. But yeah, they're just two fighters. That's all. I think they're 3-minute rounds too.
Go ahead, Michael.
Stupid.
No, I enjoy women's boxing. In fact, I was watching. There was a fight the other night on DAZN last week, and what happens? My wife passing by, and she sits down and she wants to watch, and she's watching, and she
on the gym soon.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to women boxing. It's okay. It doesn't interest me as much as the men, because oftentimes they're not as good. The skill level is entirely different. But I can get into a good women's fight. To put it different, to take your question in a different direction earlier, John, about the U.S.'s role in boxing. There are fewer top American boxers than ever before, right? Probably. And the days of Americans dominating the sport are over. Or gone probably forever, largely because the amateur system in America is just it's just not there like it used to be. The gyms are mostly gone, and there's no money in backing up the Olympic programs. And any amateur coach will tell you that the amateurs aren't being trained the way they need to be to compete on a world level in the Olympics and internationally. And we see that in the Olympics. Right, and so that translates to a lower skill level in the pros often enough. But there's still, like Nigel said, there's still some very good American fighters and great fights taking place in America, which is more important than anything.
That's cool. And my thought on the women, if I may, real fast.
Sure.
What kept me? I mean, I do think it's getting better. In fact, the fight that happened on the Estrada Chocolatito undercard, I thought was a competitive fight and good to watch. But I just know for a couple decades, as the sport was introducing more women, you'd get ridiculous kind of lopsided matches. And even when you had two big names, and the biggest names that I remember, where I was like, this is a mismatch. I know that Layla Ali and Christy Martin know what they're doing in a ring, but they shouldn't be fighting each other. There's too much of a weight disparity there. And it was just kind of crazy. Like, here's Layla and here's Christy. And it was just, to me, I'm like, I don't know what the point of this is other than they're two big names, and I hope they're getting paid. But it's like Layla's going to pound the hell out of her.
Well, the talent pool is shallow, right? They're just
right. It's getting better.
It's not as shallow as it was back then.
Right. Great. Right. It is getting better, but it's compared to the men, it's just it's shallow.
I mean, we had
you hear about with every women's fight, and when you hear about these women fighters who are good fighters, they can't find anybody to fight. Like quality, I mean quality opponents. They can't find quality opponents because they're dispersed. The weight classes are not filled up with enough good fighters for these really good fighters to fight a quality opponent. So, and
that's my impression too.
That's a problem because if you're not going to get really good fights, if you're not going to get like competitive fights and one-sided fights, it is not going to be interesting over time.
No, and if anything, it kind of plays into what Nigel was saying about I don't want to see a woman get the shit kicked out of her and everything. And a lot of times, God, I remember, and again, forgive me, guys, but back when I was covering actively and stuff, I remember sitting next to Phil Berger and watching, I think, a Christy Martin mismatch, and just like, oh man, this is sick. And Phil was saying the same thing, man. It was just like, it was just
another dynamic that's going on. How everybody wants to fight whoever's the big money maker, Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather, because you got to get more money than any other fight you ever had, and that's true with Katie Taylor and Clarissa Shields. If you fight them, that's going to be your biggest purse. But that doesn't help too much. But that's two fighters that are in the position that many other male stars had been in the past, where you want to fight those guys, win or lose, because you're going to make a lot of money.
Right.
Understood. Guys, should we wrap? We're coming up on 2 hours. I don't want to, especially for you East Coast guys, it's almost 10 o'clock, or it is 10 o'clock. As Mike knows, I could go on for hours. So, but and certainly Nigel, I don't want you, to wear out my welcome with you and everything. So.
No, I like talking about boxing.
I'm good for wrapping it up.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
This is a good place to leave it and everything. Hey, I do want to acknowledge that in every issue of Ringside Seat, beyond the great book reviews, there's always a lot of great advertisement for other boxing histories as well. Not only Bill and Nigel's books, but other writers. McFarlane is a great publisher that always has their books in there. And again, I just, as you can tell from this conversation, everybody, I'm as much of a fan of the history of boxing as I am what's currently going on. In fact, probably more so about the history. And it really is. There's so many great books that keep coming out. In fact, there's a great feature in the new issue 13, about Mark Cram Jr.'s book about Joe Frazier.
Yep. Yes, that was reviewed by Ronnie McCluskey. Very good review. And I haven't read that book yet, and I plan to based on Ronnie's review.
That's awesome, and I'm curious to read it. That's the thing, guys. Literally, I read every issue of Ringside Seat, and it's like all of a sudden my reading list, gets bigger, and I keep going and either buying hard copies or Kindle editions of various new books and everything. No. Yeah, there's never enough talk about boxing history as far as I'm concerned, and that's why I really appreciate you guys coming back and Nigel coming on for the first time. So
I finally got it figured out.
No, that's awesome, man. Hey, I'm gonna bug you to come back, Nigel, because I'd love to pick your brain more. Truly, so many great. Steve Farhood does an amazing feature about his favorite fight venues.
Oh yeah, they're really funny. He's got a good sense of humor when he writes.
Yeah.
One he wrote about Don King was great.
I don't think we mentioned it. I think we were talking about it before, but Eric's column with the awards is
year-end awards.
Oh yeah, that's funny as hell. Absolutely. No, exactly, guys. Seriously, I just really think and truly, I'm not saying this because they're here, but I really think Ringside Seat is just a superior publication that any fight fan will find great, beautiful stories, well covered the sport, both modern day and looking back. Mike, I can't gush enough about how well you lay out the magazine. It visually is just so gorgeous, and again, everyone has seen, and I'll even take one more pass through the magazine as we're wrapping up and just show people the incredible photographs and the layouts that you do.
That's all Michael.
Yeah. Well, that's, really great photos. Here's Steve's thing about his 10 fight venues, but there's a great article about Lewis and the Bum of the Month Club. There's Eric's book.
Gruber. Yep.
Absolutely. I'm looking, there's the McFarlane ad of all the great books. Look, Bojack. Come on, I want to learn more about Bojack. Jesus, here's the Frazier book, and there's of course Young Joe, yep. Outstanding. So no, this truly unbelievable stuff and a good ad for the Noir Foundation, but really tremendous stuff. It's a great issue, and really as we've said, if you choose to buy a subscription and stuff, you'll get the annual, and it's a great collection of stuff. So again, go to ringsideseatmag.com, and that will link you up. You'll also read Nigel's incredible tribute to Marvin Hagler. So that's great, guys, that you do, because of publishing and the immediacy of the web, that you will, put stuff up on the website in addition to the magazines. Because I don't even know when is issue 14 due out. Not to rush you guys.
May, June.
Yeah, May. I think like May, somewhere around that. Yeah, May.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome.
And it's a good one too. Everything's been assigned. The stories are getting written right now, right, Nigel?
Boy, I tell you. Well, I'll tell you is I'm having a real adventure with this one. I've been tasked with writing a story. It's all Bill's fault, of course, about the death of Sonny Banks when Leotis Martin fight in Philadelphia in 1965. It was
right.
So,
Correct.
Wow.
I've been doing a lot of research, and I feel a little bit like Sherlock Holmes. I'm trying to find people who may have remembered. I'll just tell you this real quick before we go. I found an address for what looks like the grandson of that Tom, was it Ewald?
Yes.
And I had to write him a letter. Can you believe that? I actually mailed it today to this guy. He's like the third.
Right.
And now I'm going to start on the other co-manager, because I think if anybody knows how to get any relatives of Sonny Banks, they might be able to.
Sure.
Because they were very close. I even looked up his mother and stuff, but you can. They were from Tupelo, where Elvis Presley was from. So, I'm resorting to writing letters. That's really crazy.
That's good. Good.
Vintage.
Well spent shoe lever. That's good.
Yeah, 14. Bill shared with me his lineup for stories. Fantastic.
I'm excited.
Thanks.
That's great, man. Well, even just hearing that tease from Nigel is going to be worth it. So, looking forward to that. But, 13 is out there, everybody. RingsideSeatMag.com is where you can subscribe and then get your copy of the annual as well. So, guys, as Bill and Mike, is always a pleasure talking. And Nigel, a long time coming, man, and it's really been a pleasure talking.
I had a lot of fun.
That's great to hear. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. And
Bye, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Bye,
In just a couple hours, we're going to do our Outer Limits podcast where we review the original series. And we're on the final episode of season 1. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And look forward to that. So thank you for watching.